Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and today we are doing a build case sort of overview experience with the MSI GUNGNIR 110R. I don't actually know that that's how you say that case name, but regardless, MSI was kind enough to send it over, so I'm going to build a system in this chassis and just sort of see how it goes. So come on along for the ride, let's get right into it. Ta-da! Now, this chassis is not crazy expensive, but it's also not cheap. Right now, it ranges anywhere from seemingly about $120 to $130, though of course, depending on where you're purchasing it, that price will absolutely vary a little bit. I'll link it down below so you can actually check current availability and pricing on Amazon. But first I guess impressions here is it looks good. Let's go ahead and get these side panels off. These are not captive thumb screws. However, we do have a nice little handle on the back of these side panels, so they are easy to actually grab a hold of. They're sort of silvered screws here. Okay, so on the front panel side here, the I/O that we're going to be looking at, we have your normal headphone jack, your microphone jack. You have a couple of USB 3.0 ports. You also do have USB Type-C. You have a reset button, a power button, and there's actually an LED button over there as well, which we'll come around to on this side now. So all of these fans in this chassis are ARGB fans. At least it appears that they use a standard ARGB header. And there is an LED control board on here. Now, the control board itself actually is basically just a breakout board. There is an ARGB connector here that you can plug directly into your motherboard, and it's powered by a SATA power plug. So from one hub here, you could control not just all the fans in this system, which it comes with 4 of them, 3 up front, 1 in the back, which is really nice to see that many fans. But also then you have a couple of spare headers here that you could plug in a couple of light strips. You could plug in maybe a CPU fan to it. There are several options here to actually plug other things into this control board. It also looks like they use a little bit of gaff tape here to just sort of hold those plugs in place, which I'm absolutely fine with. That's not a bad implementation, and I do like to see this. They're actually mounted on standoffs. This circuit board is mounted on standoffs on the backside of the chassis, so it's hard mounted there. It's not like double-sided tape that you see with a lot of these controllers. It's not going to fall off or anything like that, and the cables are already reasonably well managed. You have some cable management channeling down here. My one knock on the channeling that I already know is going to be a bit of an issue, this is not sort of pushed back into the chassis at all, so this side panel might struggle to close once all the cables are in place. The other concern that I have here is on the front of this chassis. This is solid. So the air intake comes at the top, there's a little at the bottom, there's some on the sides, and there's a little gap here as well that I believe there's, a little bit of air can get in there. I don't know if that's enough airflow for a case like this. Now the upside is MSI does make a chassis that's almost identical to this one, except that this window is all mesh instead. Unfortunately, that particular chassis only comes in black, and I'll link that one down below as well. But if you're concerned about airflow, that would absolutely be the way to go. As such, the chassis I'm putting in this system, I don't think is gonna be too much of a system for the airflow from this case. I think it'll be just fine because I'm working with a Ryzen 7 APU and an RX 6600. It should be just fine. Last couple of things to mention, there is a fan filter on top of the chassis. There's also one on the bottom of the chassis for the power supply, and on the back side they have all of their accessories, manuals, and in their hard drive bays, which there are a couple of slots for your standard hard drives, there are the rest of your screws, zip ties, that sort of thing. So with all that said, let's go ahead and start building in this thing, and I guess I'm just gonna kind of see how it goes. So one of my concerns about this chassis was that these fans included use completely separate fan headers and LED connectors. So the hub is not an all-inclusive thing. It just controls the LEDs. Fortunately, in the case, and I was really hoping to see this, there is a fan splitter that breaks out one fan header from your motherboard into 3 separate fans. Now, unless you have an absolutely budget motherboard, then that should actually be enough, because typically you're going to have a fan header sort of back here that can cover this fan, you have a CPU fan header, and you probably have at least one other system fan header somewhere on the board, which you can connect these 3 fans up to. So it's really good to see this inclusion. Also like to see it's a nice long cable, so you can get it plugged into a fan header and then tucked around behind the motherboard tray, so it's out of sight, out of mind. So good job MSI including that. Also, another thing I wanted to mention and call out here, the motherboard standoffs are already installed for a standard ATX motherboard. So once again, sometimes it's the little things. So good job MSI on that front as well. Okay, so it's about the moment of truth time, and then I'll kind of take you on a tour around the system and sort of call out the things that I noticed here about this chassis. Wow, this thing is twist tied like crazy. So here's the good news. This chassis was easy to build in. The cable management is actually really nice. My one knock that I said before I put it together is I wish there was a little bit more of an indentation on the backside here to manage the fatter power cables. But other than that, cable management is really simple. There's a lot of grommets in this particular chassis that afford you a lot of options for running your cables where they need to go. And here we go. Gotcha. Let's actually see this thing light up. Oh, yes. Okay, so I do want to call out just a couple more things that I've noticed as I put this system together. I'll show you the backside of the motherboard tray here as well, because I am very impressed with the ease of build. And to give you some insight here, what you're seeing on the front side here, I used literally 0 zip ties in this entire build. The closest I got was a couple of these twist ties that were included in some of these pre-managed cables. Everything else is managed by stuffing cables in the power supply basement, or by using the built-in cable management over here along the side of the motherboard tray. Another thing I do want to call out, even though there's not a ton of airflow going into the chassis, there actually is also a front fan filter. You have to pop off this front panel to get to it, but there is a fan filter there, which, to be honest, with as narrow as some of these other openings are, I would actually almost recommend just pulling that fan filter out to give those fans just a little bit more easy access to air. But the build itself came together nicely. Looks like one of my fans isn't turning on the back there. Now I'm curious if that's just a problem with the fan or whether it's a problem with the way I have my header set up. Let's find out. So that back fan does actually function. Apparently I either have that header just turned off, or I just don't have it set up correctly for that fan in the BIOS, but I plugged it into a different header on the motherboard and it's just fine. So the fan itself is fine, not a defect on this case. So quality control on fans, I'm 4 for 4. That's a pretty small sample size though. But this is a really nice chassis to build in. Let's make sure this button works. Yep, we can cycle through different LED effects with just the button, which is really nice. I don't have the cooler. This Arctic cooler is not plugged into the controller on the backside for the RGB. If I was leaving this together permanently, I totally would do that. But yeah, I'm actually really happy with this right now. So once again, this case is linked in the description down below for current pricing and availability. But if you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I will let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I will see you guys in the next video.